All right, so I saw how much you guys enjoyed my overview of my Monarch Standard P, so I figured we'd dive into my main bass, which is a custom Fodera Emperor Deluxe 5-string. So this is my main bass and the one that I use on almost every project that I have. If you'd like to know a little bit of the backstory about how I got involved playing Fodera basses, please check out this video that I'll tag here. So, born in the pandemic on July 14th, 2020, this bass was built out to be my use for everything #1 bass. I had this bass built by the guys at Fodera based on kind of 3 different things. One were the options that I had always dreamed of if I were ever going to be able to own a Fodera. 2 were the things that I had researched and learned about along the way that I thought would augment this build and make it better. And 3 were things that were inspired by the guys in the shop. As we dive into this a little bit deeper, you'll kind of see where those 3 things come into play here. Okay, here's the specs for this instrument. For the body, I went with roasted ash, which if I remember correctly was a new-ish option for Fodera at the time. For the top wood, we've got flamed light koa. Considering the ash, I kind of wanted the bite that wood has. You know, I really like how that factors into J bass tones, so that was a good choice for me. As for the top, koa was just a wood that I always thought was absolutely gorgeous, and when I built this bass, I was hoping that it was either going to turn out to be a koa top or maybe a buckeye burl top. In the end, the koa won out. Being that this is a deluxe model, this is a dovetailed 3-piece maple neck. It has a Macassar ebony fingerboard on it that I chose in the shop and topped off with abalone dots. So I've got a 3-piece maple neck on all 3 of my Foderas, and I chose this because after playing a lot of the different neck variations that they make, this one has the least compression in the sound, and I really enjoy that. I went with a deluxe model first because of a bass that I saw Victor Wooten playing a whole lot when I would go see him playing as a kid. And secondly, for this bass being kind of my #1 bass, I wanted to be able to move pretty freely from like the lower frets to the higher frets, and I didn't want something like a bolt-on, construction to get in the way. Yes, I do know that you kind of miss the snappiness in the neck that a bolt-on gives you, but for all the benefits that I get out of the deluxe model, I don't miss it at all. The ebony fingerboard is a choice for articulation, and I also particularly loved the colors that were in this piece of wood. It's just not your typical piece of entirely black ebony. Anyway, I kind of tend to play a little bit darker in my fingers, and the ebony kind of helps me re-articulate some of that sound. I really actually enjoy playing rosewood the best, but I tend to sound a little bit muddy when I play that, so maybe something like that is really great, obviously, for like my P-bass sound, which I want to be dark and a little bit muddy. But for something like this where I really want to hear each and every note really clearly, ebony was a great choice. For an added bonus, they were able to use another piece of the koa from the same board and make a back of head stock veneer for this bass. It was actually on Fodera's website for a long time. I'm not entirely sure if it's there now. Cosmetically, I topped this off with doing black hardware on this bass. I thought that it would really kind of suit it very well, although I thought for quite a while about going gold. The neck is 34 inches in scale length. Yes, I know that the tension of a longer scale length would be better for something like a low B, but my hands physically do better with 34 and less. Honestly, the B is still wonderful on this bass. The string spacing on this is 17.5 millimeters. I played 19 for a long time. I grew up playing actually like super skinny Ibanez string spacing as well. Like I've played on both sides of this, but 17.5 ended up feeling like home for my hands. As is with most Foderas, this one's 24 frets, and the bass was set up with light strings and low action. I've kept it that way ever since. All right, let's move on to electronics. This one has the Fodera custom preamp with the 3-band EQ. The pickups are the Fodera Duncan dual coils with matching wood covers placed in the 70s position. One of my favorite sounds that I use all the time are centered J pickups in the 70s position, and this bass nails that with the combination of the ash body. By the way, just in case you'd like to reference some of these specs with the official Fodera website, down below I'll put a link so that you can check out the newborn page. Okay, here's some of the unique things that we did in the construction of this bass. When I was in my research phase preparing to build this bass, I was kind of scouring the website and looking at all the various options that were on, like, you know, the signature instruments, etc., etc. And I came across something that I really loved in the James Genus bass, which was the enlarged aluminum side dots. I figured for the amount of playing that I end up doing in the dark on gigs or whatever, that something like this would come in handy, and it felt like a really good move for me considering I didn't quite want to go the loom inlay route. This has in fact been a really useful feature for me on gigs. A second thing is that I mentioned earlier that this was kind of the point where Fodera had started offering the roasted ash bodies, which I had seen some companies kind of picking up on online, and they were talking about, you know, stability and like tonal aging and things like that. There is a huge difference between the roasted bodies that I've played and the non-roasted bodies. A third thing is that there's a two-color binding between the top and the body. I don't believe that they really proposed this as an option on the website, but the guys at the shop suggested it and I went with it, and I really love what it did for this instrument. It really makes that top pop. Another thing is the cut on this neck. I did something really wacky with it. At one point in the process, I went to the shop and did a little bit of like body neck customizing with Dan, and I ended up asking him to cut the standard neck profile from fret 1 to 5, and then the thin fast around the 12th fret onward, and there was a blend in the middle. I liked this cut so much that I had them measure it and save it for later so that we could use it on my fretless, which I ended up building 2 or 3 years later. More on that in another video. Lastly, I had them cut an ebony ramp for this bass, which this was my first bass with a ramp ever, but I was talking to a couple of friends at the time who suggested that something like a ramp would help me with the hand issues that I was having by helping me not to dig into the bass too much. I find that very accurate, and as a bass player, I feel my hands are healthier than ever. So I also understand that you came here to hear this bass as well, so I recorded as many of the tone settings that I typically use as I could, with one difference. For the sake of you hearing the full tonal spectrum of what the preamp offers, I left the tone knob on 100%, although I usually play with it somewhere around 80 or 85%. Okay, so now you've gotten to hear this bass and hear all the whack of tonal stuff that it can do. So let's talk about what I would do differently if I had done this build again. Honestly, there's only one thing I would have done. I would have roasted the neck. When we ended up building the fretless later on, we roasted both the body and the neck. I felt like there was a large difference between these two instruments. I mean, my fretted is obviously my favorite #1 bass. I love it. It is now broken in over time like a good instrument does that gets played a lot. The fretless came and it felt like it had been broken in over 30 years already. Okay, and then just one random odd tidbit that somebody might want to know. I saw people talking about this on Talkbass at one point, which is why I'm addressing it. The idea of the color of the finish against the age of the bass. When I picked this light koa top, I was told that there was a pretty high chance that it would get lighter as time went on. I really did want a dark koa top initially, but because I love the flame so much in this one, I just went with it. I know that on the Fodera gallery page that this bass looks a little dark. I feel like those images were a little bit contrasty in comparison to what it looked like when it first came out. But in reality, this bass has actually visually gotten darker with age. So that's it. What an awesome instrument. I love it so much. I can't thank the guys at Fodera enough for everything that they've done for me. Those are instruments I want to keep forever. Huge, huge, huge shout out to all of those guys. Sometime coming up, I'll post a video about what I did differently with my fretless bass in comparison to this one, the different specs, and obviously very different sounds. Thanks so much for checking out this vid. If you can help me out, like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. I'll see you next time.